This is a look at the semiconductors, and per the analysis that RV showed this week in XLK, the tech stocks, well, this is pretty much in alignment with that, with analysis of the SMH, the semiconductor ETF, and then a look at AMAT and AMD and Micron and Nvidia. Micron led the way on the downside this week in the semiconductor stocks. And I think that you're going to find this quite interesting. Let's take a look now as we switch over to SMH. So this is the semiconductor index that you can see right in here. And we're looking at the cyclical analysis. And this shows you the beautiful rhythmic action that you see right over here in these cyclical patterns. Remember that cycles are measured from trough to trough. And down over here where we look at the ideal, it just gives us the energetic movement. The importance is the shape that it takes. And you can see in here that this cycle was a positive cycle, such as this one here, because they made higher highs and higher peaks. I'm sorry, higher highs and higher lows, each of those. And then you had this big upside move where it got below that level, and that makes a left shoulder and a head. And then this failure very early and a breakdown from this low level showed you how that head and shoulders was formed, and then the market moving to the downside. And each one of these rallies hit important resistance areas and then sold off, just as you saw right over here where each one of those rallies dips after the rallies hit important supports. And those, when there's not much time to fall, we call those swamped, because the big energetic movement on the upside leaves no room for declines. In this case, the big energetic movements on the downside leaves a lot of room for declines. You can see what's happened in here is that you had this upside spike right over there, and you had upward momentum or an upturn in momentum, as you see here in the reversal scout, our proprietary indicator. And now you're getting a flattening out here in momentum and a pullback right there from resistance. So what this probably means, based on what we're seeing in here, is that there's some support in here, and we're looking for a stock market rally in January, and you probably come up back into these areas here. But then there is big risk over here where it comes down into March and potentially early April. And this is very interesting because remember, this is in alignment with our stock market analysis. So you can see what we're looking for is some choppy action right in here, and then some downward movement that could be pretty significant. Let's switch over to the daily chart. Now, this was the weekly chart that we're looking at, and let's switch over to the daily chart. And you can see here the beautiful cycle action. Whoops, let me just get rid of all that. And now what happened was that this nice upward cycle, which had good upward momentum, broke down as it got underneath this support level. And now this is set up for, as it hits the supports in here, some bounce in here, as we said in the weekly, but then likely getting up here somewhere in January and then turning down sharply again. Now you see this cycle right in here, bottoms right over here in late in January. Well, if you look at the dates on this cycle right over here, that bottoms in early to mid-March, in alignment with what we said on the weekly chart. So it probably gives you a rally and a sell-off, and then another rally, and then another sell-off. And this breakdown is over here that we said is very negative, and that sets up this weekly pattern in here on the weekly chart as a lot of chop right in here, and then ultimately finding its way to the downside in some significant way. So we would look for this to be the pattern that we see in the other semiconductor stocks. Let's just take a look here at the weekly charts as we look at a few others of the semiconductors. We'll start with Applied Material, AMAT. And you can see that this will pretty much match up with what we're looking at in here. So this is Applied Materials, and you can see it looks a lot like the semiconductor index. And again, what we're looking for is support here, a lot of choppy action right in here, and then sometime in January, a peak, and then moving down here into April. You can see that gives you maybe even some range area between 115 and down over here, 88 or 93, where you could do some option strategies that work within that range. So that's applied material. Again, fails exactly from resistance and then comes down to this near support area and likely to get a choppy period here that results in a big move down into that March time frame. AMD is the next one that we'll look at, and you're going to see similarities in here. You see that big break in there as each one of those rallies failed from resistance, and now also this pointing out to that April low and a lot of potential chop. And here we're looking at a potential range of around 60 to 81 and probably trading a lot in that area. Notice here you're getting the downturn in momentum. So another sign that semiconductor is going to be range bound and then resolve itself to a good size hit on the downside. The next one we'll look at in here is Micron, which set the negative trend this week. And you can see right here, it looks very much the same. The problem is that this stock, Micron, is almost breaking down that support right now. So that means that the rally will be more shallow in here and then moving down again here into April. So when you get this rally into January that we're looking for, this would then be a sell, and we're projecting down to probably as low as $44 here in Micron. So that means if you get a rally up here into some resistance, which I don't have in here yet, and you see the momentum turn down right there, that means this peak is significant. And maybe you get up here into the low to mid 50s and then head back down to 45. So there's a pretty good idea of another chart that says that move down into March, April is pretty likely. And the last one we'll look at in here is Nvidia, NVDA. So amazing that these stocks, they got bid up based on the shortage in the semiconductors. But then, of course, semiconductors are a commodity. And that reflects how these movements can be very large in the stocks as their fortunes for earnings change pretty significantly. This stock fails again at the resistance area, coming down now. The momentum is still a little bit positive in this one, so it gives you some sense that there could be an upside move that maybe equals this. Maybe it gets up to this 188, 198 area right in there before it then does turn down. So this one looks a little bit stronger than the other ones. At the same time, I would not look for it to get above that area of about 198 and then turn down again in here and take out this low somewhere around 150. So a lot of wide swings there that we're looking for in Nvidia, and ultimately a pretty good size break again there out into that March-April period. A lot of synchronicity that we see there in the semiconductors between the ETF and these particular stocks. Also the same that we see with the XLK, the other tech stocks out there. And it just says to us that the sum of the evidence that we're looking at here is such that a rally into the early part of the year should be really held in suspicion, with a fairly large decline due out into that March-April period for the semiconductors, along with many of the other tech stocks, very much in line with what we're looking at in the stock market.